Hi, welcome to this presentation on the Cumberland Mills Triangle located within the city of Westbrook, Maine. This is a presentation for a urban regional planning class called Planning Theory and History. My name is David Champoux. I'm a PhD student in the Transportation Engineering program at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. I have my Bachelor's of Science degree in Civil Engineering from Clarkson University, and I'm a registered engineer in training within every state of the United States. So here's an outline of what I'd like to talk about today. I'd like to just briefly touch upon the early 20th century automobile evolution. I'd like to then discuss what and where is the Cumberland Mills Triangle, what it is, where it is, what the purpose is, why are we talking about it, the motivation for study, and the history of its development. Then I'd like to go on to some spatial and time changes and how they interact with each other in both directions, frontwards and backwards, and how land use effects are also affecting the spatial and time changes. Then I'd like to touch upon some traffic operations and noting that really traffic is a function of land use or adjacent surrounding land uses in different areas. And I'd like to talk about some simulation models. And then moving forward, how do you balance two initiatives? Managing growth, and traffic management. And I'll talk about a program that the local MPO, PACS, Portland Area Comprehensive Transportation Systems in Portland, Maine, is trying to address these concerns. And finally, how do you balance the objectives of many stakeholders within projects, namely planners, engineers, politicians? How? And perhaps we can apply some rationality and responsivity that planners can apply to make these projects a little bit smoother. Okay, so let's first start off with the automobile evolution. I'm going to take some notes from the reading from one of our class assignments. This is by Mr. Kenneth Jackson, and the reading specifically was The Drive-In Culture of Contemporary America. So after the post-war decentralization, there was a lot of sprawl into suburbs, right? So from the city, a lot of people able to own vehicles, automobiles, were able to live farther out from sort of the central core. And that, basically, once you had an automobile, you didn't have to live in the central core anymore. Well, within the city of Westbrook, without giving you any geographic locations on this slide yet, I just want to say that Westbrook is known for its paper mills, or that's what it was known for back during World War I, World War II, and so forth, during the 19th and 20th centuries. So once automobiles came about, there was actually a decentralization within the Warren paper mills. Warren was the family who actually owned the mills at one time. And this can be also shown through adjacent land use changes and major transformations over time. So the paper mill industry was Westbrook's lifeblood until about the late 1980s, and then it was more of a economical industry services type of an economy that sort of took over the revenue aspect for the city. But the mill is still in operation today. And one of the things that's interesting here is the Cumberland Mills Triangle is a land use. So it's a triangular piece of land that is caught right in the middle of the mills and downtown Westbrook. So it's very interesting. So post years brought prosperity to the United States with different forms of electrical gadgets, right, that appeared in many middle-class American homes all over the country. And, these included, air conditioners and refrigerators and, electric garage openers and so forth. Just a lot of different electrical components that now a lot of middle-class families owned. But one of the best symbols of this individual success and identity was to own an automobile, to basically own this piece of metal and machinery that had air conditioning and had all the amenities at the time on wheels, right? And so between 1950 and 1980, the American population rose by 50%, but an astounding statistic here is that automobile ownership increased by a smashing 200%. So that showed in the 1920s many people were purchasing automobiles, and that's what led to this urban sprawl. So automobile and the suburbs have combined to create what Mr. Jackson calls this drive-in culture. So now you're driving into places as opposed to living in them before. You have an origin and a destination, and your origin is outside of that, area of the city in the middle, or the area in which everything was located before. Now your origin is sort of outside, and you're driving into things. So the automobile has, in a sense, restructured the pattern of everyday life. The interstate highway system provides likable, or it proved to be likable amongst car-owning taxpayers. And, back in the 1950s, when Eisenhower, created the Interstate Highway Act of 1956, it really benefited cars and trucks, and really the people who were paying for the pieces that were not provided by the federal government were taxpayers, right? And so really these people were the best customers, for this. So let's just explore a case study with this in mind here, all right? So this is actually from this paper on future social and technological change and its impact on transportation planning and management. And this was written by Beamborn et al. At the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And this university has what I found in my research to be a wonderful urban planning, transportation research. They do a lot in this area. And one of the quotes I wanted to take out of this here is the following. The pace and complexity of change in transportation planning and management has become so rapid over recent years that traditional approaches to transportation programs and policies no longer appear to be valid, right? So basically what this is trying to say is the huge rate of change that we've seen in planning and management of infrastructure has grown so fast that the approaches and the strategies that we use as planners and engineers and policymakers to make a difference or to keep the system running no longer works for the rate in which we have. And this is now something that I'd like to discuss in the context of the Cumberland Mills Triangle. So where is the Cumberland Mills Triangle? Well, this is the state of Maine right here. It's bordering New Hampshire. This is Concord and Manchester, New Hampshire. This is Portland, Maine, and Westbrook is in this zone right here. And so we're going to zoom in further. So the Cumberland Mills Triangle is this area represents Westbrook. This is part of Westbrook, and the triangle itself is right here. So it's bordered by, let's see, 1, 2, 3. It's bordered by 3 roads, right? It's a triangle, right? So by definition, a triangle is 3 sides, right, that are all connected together. But as you can see, there are many more roads that actually sort of intersect with this triangle, and so these are all highlighted here. These are all adjacent routes that are feeders into this triangle from a traffic operations standpoint. So let's just take a little bit of a historical trend here. The Cumberland Mills Triangle back in 1949, this is the triangle itself, and what you're noticing is this is where traffic began to flow one way. Okay, so 1949, they changed, engineers changed the direction of flow to one way. Okay, you can see these arrows right here. Used to be before that you could travel in both directions on each link. Now it's one way, and these are the arrows. Okay, in 1983, Warren Avenue, which is this road right here, was rebuilt to intersect here at the Star. So it used to be right here. It used to connect here at Warren Avenue here, which was where the road was before 1983. But after 1983, there was some land use agreements, some changes within the mill infrastructure, who owned the mill, and ultimately they needed more space for the mill, and so they relocated the road here. And this made traffic operations rather interesting and an intriguing study to look at. So here's more pictures from 1949 of the triangle itself. This is looking at the point, sort of at like the northern point of the triangle, and as you can see, this was before 1983 because this direction is really one way now. So you can see vehicles parking in the other direction. But as you can see, these vehicles are pretty luxurious for that time. Again, here is the triangle itself. This is where it's looking. So if we go back, basically what you're seeing is this point right here is actually this point right here, and so we're looking down Cumberland Street. This was the Warren Avenue, which I said before was moved from here. Now it's to here. So here is the same location as in here. This is the same location. Fast forward from 1949 now to 2012, and what you'll see here is really nothing has changed much. Okay, in terms of land use and in terms of how the road is actually set up, okay, you know, this building has the same architecture, it's the same structure itself. There might be different businesses that have moved in there, but really, you know, it really hasn't changed much from back, you know, a long time ago. This is Cumberland Street. Okay, so these are the railroad tracks here. That this is actually a freight train that's running through here. I don't know if you can see that. I put a little railroad sign here just to sort of give viewers the perspective. But this is the train track, nevertheless, and this is Cumberland Street, in which we're looking at here. And so this same point was this point all the way down here, and so we're basically traveling this way, right? Okay, so this is Cumberland Street looking south if you're going this way, and it's north if you're coming this way. Okay, so if you're coming this way towards the train tracks, you're looking north. If you're going away from the train tracks, you're looking south. So current traffic heads north in a one-way fashion, and this was, you know, this picture's in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. But again, prior to 1983, traffic was going in two ways in both directions. And as you can see, it's unpaved here. It's just dirt, and there are carriages here. You can see this one thing in the distance. Here's another perspective. This is in 1985. So this is now we're located about here, as opposed to before. I think we were located here or somewhere up here. And again, this is the same railroad tracks that run over. You can see here that the road is paved, and it's one way, right? The traffic is moving in a one-way direction, and that was after 1983. And as you can see, here's some signs that say to Warren Avenue, take a right here, or if you're going downtown Westbrook, you stay in the left lane. So let's just look at the Historical Society within Westbrook has provided me with many resources here on the Cumberland Mills Triangle, and I want to give them my appreciation and thank you. But basically, what we can see here is the land use has not significantly changed over the last 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years here, but the traffic dynamics have really changed. All right? And that's something that needs to be looked at. If you notice here, these are different signs, but they're really saying the same thing. Okay. Now I just want to point out here that this is the mill here in the background, right? So you can see how close the mill is to the Cumberland Mills Triangle itself. This is another perspective along Main Street. So now Cumberland Street is over here. Okay, this is Cumberland Street right here. We're looking at Main Street. Okay, this is one of the other legs of the triangle, and as you can see, this is assuming late 1800s, early 1900s. This is before any paving took place, and the automobile, you know, really was not the mode of transportation here. As you can see, you can actually see tracks from horses and carriages and bikes and pedestrians along the street here. So the street really wasn't that wide, but it's about the same width today as it was back then, and it's, you know, fitting automobiles, a different form of transportation. And around the corner here, down here, is where a Rite Aid pharmacy now sits, and I'll show you that in a little bit. So here's the Rite Aid. So we were looking at this location here on the previous slide, and now we're just coming down here. We're looking at the triangle from a different perspective. Remember, the triangle is this piece right here. This is the triangle. And so we're looking at different pieces here, and this is where the Rite Aid sits. So this is looking south now on Main Street in the Cumberland Mills Triangle, and Rite Aid now sits to the left. I put a little arrow here, and so these are all houses and residential houses for mill workers, actually. This is a church in the background. This is where the mill workers went to church. And so as you can see, the Cumberland Mills Triangle, back during the 1800s, early 1900s, actually functioned as sort of its own inner city central core district for the mill. All right, and this was all before the 1930s. This is the Cumberland Street here, all right, and this is Westbrook celebrating the 1914 centennial. So this is in 1914, and you can see here that this is before, again, the streets were paved, and I added in this little train track here. This is for streetcars, okay? So it was very difficult to actually see the streetcar track, and so that's why I drew it in here, just to give viewers the understanding that this was a multimodal network before the automobile came about. And notice that the power lines here actually were turned on, I believe, in the late 1800s, and so that was a big deal for the city of Westbrook. And that's how the streetcars ran. They ran off of the electricity. This is just land use changes with architectural features. I just added in some trees and just trying to show viewers the differences, what stuff could look like or what it might have looked like a long time ago, if the pictures were sort of enhanced. So now this point right here where I'm circling is the same point that we looked at the beginning, okay? So this road is heading towards Portland, Maine, and if you head down this way, where I'm drawing the cursor, this is Cumberland Street right here. Okay, this is Cumberland Street, and right here is Main Street. Okay, and what you'll notice is you have some more streetcar tracks, multimodal transportation, and after automobiles were manufactured, these streetcar lines were actually taken out. You can see an automobile here, but you can see there's sidewalks for pedestrians, streetcars. It's multimodal use. It seems balanced. Here's again with some landscape features added, with some trees here in the background, and also the streetcar line sort of. I tried to create a perspective here just to show viewers as the streetcar winds down the road here, okay? But you get the idea that this looks very balanced as opposed to what it looks like today. This is an image of San Francisco actually in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and this shows the street width and the downtown district. And I think there's you can look at. I think there's probably 2 or 3 streetcar lines here. You can see there's a lane for automobiles here, and there's pedestrians. There's huge sidewalks. There's bike lanes. This is what we're all striving to and trying to come back to after the automobile evolution in the 1920s. The Cumberland Mills Triangle here. Now the question is, did we imagine the same types of aesthetically pleasing land uses back, say, in 1936? This is actually a picture of Main Street entering the city of Westbrook from the other end, not from the Portland end, but from the western ends. It's actually borders with the town of Gorham on the western end and borders Portland on the eastern end. And this is actually entering the Cumberland Mills Triangle is way down here in the distance. But as you can see, this is a nice picture that I didn't alter in any way. This was in one of the local Westbrook newspapers a long time ago, as you can see, 1936. And it's funny how we like to paint the type of land use and its attributes that we as people like or think is important in adding, right, to be aesthetically pleasing or to enjoy, what we like to live in. Very interesting. So here are some land use opportunity changes, and what I've done here is I've taken a look at, here's the triangle itself, all right, and each of these numbers represents sort of like a parcel lot or an area in which you could change the land use. You could make it all into sort of green space if you wanted to. This is where the Rite Aid pharmacy is now. This is a medical building that was newly built about 10 years ago. This is a gas station in a bowling alley, and these are just sort of some re- residential / office buildings. And so what you can see here is the land use really makes a difference in terms of how traffic flows. I mean, every, I don't know, what do you want to call this distance? Maybe 100 feet, so you have an entrance here, and then about 10, 20 feet down the road, you have another entrance into this lot, and then on this side, you have driveways. And so really, from a traffic engineering standpoint, how do you actually move traffic through this triangle? That's something that's been very difficult for engineers in trying to work with land use planners, urban regional planners, and so forth to try to tackle the issue. So land use changes or not? That's the question, right? So where are we today? So in late 1990s, as you can see, there really is a lack of green space, but before Rite Aid was put in, what you'll notice is, and I believe this picture was taken during the winter months, as you can see, it's really, everything's browning, but what you can see is there really is a lack of park space or green space. And the other thing that you can notice here is what I've circled here is before the Rite Aid was put in early 2000, 2001, these were actually houses and residences for the mill, which runs right over here, right? So the triangle itself was really housing for the mills. This is just a perspective that one of the regional planning students who I joined forces with on another project, he helped design this with me. And this is just trying to show a perspective of the triangle itself. This is Cumberland Street, this is Warren Avenue, and this is Harnois Avenue, the base of the triangle. And this is where the Rite Aid sits now. But so as you can imagine, this is where the housing once sat for the mill. And what you notice is there's a lot of entrances and access points onto the roads from these adjacent land uses. So again, the question is, how do you actually move traffic while trying to keep in balance the objectives of land use and economic vitality of the city and so forth? So in 1976, the Cumberland Mills Triangle underwent an extensive traffic study. And what we're seeing here is this is the north end of the triangle, okay? So this used to be an actual pharmacy. So this was before Rite Aid pharmacy, that the chain Rite Aid was actually put in. And what you notice here is this is the north end of the triangle, all right? This is one of the first spots that we visited along the tour back about, 10, 15 slides ago. And what you'll notice here is, here's the mill in the background, and the objective here of the study was to actually increase vehicular speeds. Now, this is rather interesting from a traffic engineering standpoint, because nowadays, traffic engineering programs and a lot of issues that are seen within, towns and cities and suburban areas are trying to reduce vehicle speeds. The problem here is what you notice is there's a lack of pedestrian crossing space here, and the issue that was brought up at a meeting was a multimodal issue. This is, I believe, this is 1976, so all the streetcar tracks were removed, they were paved over, everything is now automobile oriented, and that is backed up here by wanting to increase the vehicle speeds. But the problem was that people were afraid that pedestrians were going to get hit, and so they thought of maybe putting in a traffic signal at this intersection here. So here is the study itself, and it says a proposal is under study by the Westbrook City Council to try to speed traffic through this intersection by reducing the size of the traffic island, which you can see here. It's very difficult to see the width or the bulkiness of the island itself, but by reducing the size of the traffic island in front of Albert's Pharmacy, which you can see here. The idea is to permit 2 lanes of westbound traffic. So westbound is actually going this way here to pass Fruitland Variety, which is right here, without abolishing the curb parking in front of the store. The curb parking's right here. So initially what you're noticing here is that before the study, there was only 1 lane of traffic that went through this downtown area, or it was really operating in a one-way fashion. Right after the triangle itself, the traffic was converted from 2 ways to 1 way. I believe around this time as we discussed earlier. And so now they want to put 2 lanes of traffic through here, but the problem is a fatal accident is very likely with pedestrians. And so what I've done here is I've added in a traffic signal for you, some cones and some lane markings of what we conventionally see today in the modern era, to just give you an idea with a crosswalk to show what the intersection might look like. So I'd like to move on now to traffic operations, and as I stated in the beginning in the objective slide, it is a function f of land use, okay? And when you think of traffic operations, we think of it's along a network, right? The network of intersections, whether they have a traffic light at them or not, and it's a function of the surrounding land uses and access points, right? If you think about it, it's a simple concept, but it's a very complex issue. And the point is, it all goes back to access. The question, though, is why is it a complex issue, right? If you take a look at this picture, this is actually a picture taken from an arterial street in Detroit, Michigan, actually. And this is very interesting because what you can see is, here's the first traffic light. Then you go downstream, I don't know, maybe about 100 feet. 200 feet, and you get another traffic signal. Then you hit red lights here. Then you hit a third traffic light and a fourth one. And after a while, the perspective of this picture sort of starts to get, rather diluted because just of the orientation of the picture. But it brings the point of that if you were a traffic engineer and you were trying to coordinate all the traffic signals to move traffic along this arterial, but balance it with the idea of pedestrians and multimodal use, maybe transit priority, how do you actually do that? That's a complex issue. So traffic simulation software can actually illustrate different design alternatives with different land use purposes. So that's how we as traffic engineers can actually work with our colleagues and counterparts, transportation planners and urban planners, to make this all functional. Now, what would traffic operations look like in the future? All right. So imagine a world where vehicles can communicate with each other and to traffic signals. All right. So right now we all carry around a smartphone, or most people carry around at least a cell phone with them, right? And the cell phone technology has GPS tracking in it. It may have like a Bluetooth capability device that can do short range communication. When you send text messages to people, you are communicating between 2 different places, right? And so all these bubbles right here, imagine having a smartphone in the vehicle, and these vehicles can talk to each other and say, so this red car can say, hey, I'm right behind this blue car here, and this red car might signal to the bus behind it and say, hey, I'm slowing down, don't hit me. And so the goal here is to increase mobility while simultaneously enhancing safety, okay? So reducing collisions, but also increasing efficiency at intersections and along roadway networks, different traffic facilities. The question is, does this impact land use development strategies, and does it affect urban sprawl? Now, I'm not going to go in too much detail into these. This is a whole different topic within itself, but you can imagine how did these, traffic operations issues affect land use development strategies and urban sprawl. So here's connected vehicle technology and congestion, right? So imagine that the road networks, have reduced congestion through technology and changes in driver perception of what the peak hour is, right? So we say, 5 o'clock, okay, that's the peak hour, we're going to be stuck in traffic. But imagine if we could actually change that, and by using this technology here, these are communication devices which then communicate to these connected vehicles or these traffic signals here in this photo. And imagine if we can change or nudge people's behavior and sort of change the way in which they view different peak hours, or the way in which they view driving, or when they make their trips. You could actually reduce congestion and not even need to build more space. Okay, so future technology and land use changes. So does this future technology act as an impetus to changes in land uses? So Mr. Frank Lloyd Wright, which is a graduate of the University of Wisconsin-Madison, he was an American architect and an interior designer, writer, and educator. And in one of the readings that I implemented here in this slide presentation is that Frank Lloyd Wright, as Mr. Fishman writes, he's the editor of the the article that I read, so Frank Lloyd Wright saw that auto ownership combined with superhighways and basically removes the need for populations to cluster in a particular spot. So Wright is an advocate of the central city and human interaction. So basically, Frank Lloyd Wright wanted to see people interact. So you're on the street, you're walking down, the center core of the city, and you see folks. Hey, John, how's it going? Hey, Frank, what's going on? How's your family doing? Sort of all the niceties that used to be, right? And now the automobile kind of actually, it actually shuns people from this, and it clusters people in congestion rather than in communication. Now, we're not thinking about the connected vehicle technology here at this point. We're just sort of simply saying theoretically, instead of being able to talk to people and move by foot, now you're actually clustering people on a road within vehicles, and nobody can communicate to each other. You actually can't get anything done. And so traveling at 60 miles per hour with a vehicle, each individual can actually create their own city. So before I move on to the traffic simulation, I just wanted to sort of talk a little bit more about Frank Lloyd Wright and his idea of this broad acre city. And so by being able to travel by car, each individual could create their own city. That's what he's calling the broad acre city. Everyone can sort of create their own city, and it really is an impetus to urban suburban development, and it's outpacing the importance of a city center. And this is what he wrote about in his 1932 book, The Disappearing City. And this type of development is the opposite of transit-oriented development. So Frank Lloyd Wright has a real negative perspective on this, which at the time seemed very logical and very respectful at that point. So software, as I mentioned before, interfaces transportation planners with traffic engineers. Okay, so this is a transportation software program that you can actually simulate pedestrians, vehicles, buses, road networks, adjacent land uses, green space right here, streetcar lines, train tracks. Okay, this shows you can model different scenarios to show what something might look like in the future. Okay, or if you want to design something, what it might look like. This is an example of an intersection. This is not the Cumberland Mills Triangle. This is a three-dimensional traffic simulation software. And what you can see is you got the traffic signals here, you got the different land uses, you have different access points here. And so what you can show is you have the different lanes. Okay, you have green space here, whether you have curbs, whether you have crosswalks here, this person looks like they want to cross. And so what you can see is if you're going to make a change, how is it going to impact the traffic operations as well as the transportation planning and land use aspect of it. Now what you can see in this picture is this base map is actually Google Earth, okay, or a Google map, right? And so what you can do is you can overlay what a new intersection might look like and put in these three-dimensional buildings, trees to show what the land use might look like. And this is just showing different parcels along a four-legged intersection. As you can see, this looks like the base map in Google here, and this is the new intersection itself. And you can see the additional added green space with maybe the right turn lane here with maybe a yield sign. And so again, you're combining traffic operations objectives with transportation planning initiatives, which is wonderful. And you can model the aesthetics between intersection design and adjacent land use objectives and characteristics. And really, we're just saying the same thing, but just trying to show you different perspectives. Okay, so here's my model of the Cumberland Mills Triangle. Excuse me. I used this program called Synchro Studio, which basically is a traffic simulation program. And what I designed here is I took the Google base map, as you can see here. This is the triangle itself, and I built the roads on top of the existing roads, and I added in more lanes, and I added in traffic signals at these intersections to change the way in which the triangle operates. And these numbers just represent the respective traffic volumes, right? So maybe it's 250 vehicles that go through this intersection every hour, or 100 vehicles that turn left off Warren Avenue every hour, something like that. So here's just a screenshot of the simulation running itself. And so what you can do is you can play it for the whole 10 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever you've decided to run it with. And ultimately what you can see is this is really an uncongested network at this point. I had to change the traffic volumes and increase them to sort of show a more congested network. And I'm not sure if I have that picture here to show you, but basically if you're looking at this from a traffic operations standpoint, I didn't model too many access points like this one here or this parking here on Cumberland Street to show how traffic operations can be improved by eliminating the access points but still keeping the adjacent land use initiatives. And that's what I've tried to do here on Main Street, try to show the opposite of that, right? So if you keep all these access points, you're going to put traffic operations sort of in a lower critical category here for operation in the real world. This is the north point. This is where we saw that traffic study in 1976. This is the north point of the triangle. I'm going to zoom in here and just show folks what the intersection looks like on the simulation. And again, this is what traffic engineers and what city councilmen wanted at this intersection in 1976 to put a traffic light here. Okay, so now we're going to shift gears, and how do you balance traffic management with planning? All right, so MPOs often in urban and regional planning are talked about. They're called metropolitan planning organizations, and they encompass many counties, towns, and cities. And what they do is they try to balance traffic management strategies and planning initiatives and take the onus off of each town and city, because each town and city ultimately they have their own issues, but if they're just looking at it from their own perspective, they're not going to see the bigger picture. And so the PACS in Portland, that encompasses several counties within southern Maine, Portland Area Comprehensive Transportation System, that's PACS, and they instituted in 2010 a regional traffic management system initiative, which basically meant that across any jurisdiction within their area, within their zone, all the traffic signals will be managed by one group or one engineering firm or one group of people. Okay, it's a single ownership, and the traffic signals will be coordinated for special events, congestion, and that really is one of the examples of what they're trying to do in Portland. So projects compete for funding across multiple towns, cities, and counties, and project types, right? So if you want to do intersection upgrades, if you want to put in maybe transit signal priority control, if you have many bus routes that run through different intersections and corridors, or multimodal additions, if you want to do complete streets, which is this idea before the development of the automobile, right? Where you had streetcars and you had light rail and bike lanes and pedestrian crosswalks and sidewalks, right? These all compete for the same amount of money. And so it's a time series planning versus spatial planning for the competition of these resources. And that's what's very difficult for many MPOs and cities and towns across the country. So this is just an example of the sort of the destination tomorrow major regional transportation projects, and this picture is not meant for you as the viewer to read each of these, okay? But the point is each of these boxes represents a project, okay? And this whole box right here represents some of the jurisdictions that the PACS MPO has onus of and how they fund projects, right? So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's 11 projects in just this area, and the PACS area is much more and much bigger than what you see here. And so there could be 20 or 30 projects, and let's say that there's only $10 million per year that comes in to the MPO, given from the Federal Highway Administration or the national government for roadway or transit or transportation planning initiative projects. So as you can see, many cities and towns have to go through proposal writings and must make their case to get money, which is why the Cumberland Mills Triangle has sort of been the same for a long time, right? So PACS, balances the long-term regional planning initiatives. And so regional plans in general are crucial in coordinating transportation planning initiatives. But there's difficulty is in how to get funding for real local and long-term issues, right? All right, so you can see these pictures are two completely different types of projects. This is a state highway project that runs through a city or a town or multiple cities and towns. This might be an intersection upgrade, right? And so PACS does this long-range transportation plan, as you can see, 2010 to 2035, so it'd be a 25-year plan, which is wonderful. But at the same time, if we're thinking at this broad level, how do you also get these local projects funded, right? And so you have to have these long, medium, and short-term range projects. Here's a local example about getting funding for maybe the Cumberland Mills Triangle, right? William Clark Drive is a 4-lane arterial that runs and connects to Interstate 95, which is down here. Interstate 95 runs north-south through Maine, connects to New Hampshire, Boston, all the way down to Florida. And it indirectly, this arterial indirectly connects to the Cumberland Mills Triangle. Well, how? Well, you know, drivers can get off here, they can take Main Street and get in and circulate through the triangle. And this road also connects over here to this street called 4th Street, which also connects into the Cumberland Mills Triangle. And so there was a recent upgrade to this arterial for both aesthetics, traffic operations, transportation planning, and economic vitality to the city of Westbrook. Recently done, it was a study that took about 15 years of planning from the late 1980s all the way to the early 2000s. And funding then took about 5 to 6 years, and then construction took about 2 or 3 years to be done, and it was completed about 2 or 3 years ago now. And so what we see here is transportation engineers must work with planners, architects, city regional planners, software engineers, and this brings up a good point from Mr. Martin Watts, or Walks, I should say, in his reading within the text Rodwin and Sanyal that we had for our regional planning class, education for transportation planning in a new century, right? So transportation and infrastructure planning cannot be left to just engineers alone, right? You must have different types of folks working on these projects because different people have different backgrounds, different degrees. Different degree programs offer different objectives, right? So a transportation planner thinks differently than a traffic operations engineer. And we should strengthen the technical education in a policy context and incorporate telecommunications and information flows at every level of a project. So it's project management, which is a real difficult concept for a lot of people to understand. So solutions are often a puzzle. And I want you to look at this picture here. This is basically a picture taken from the connected vehicle technology world. And so what you can see is you have vehicle status data, you have weather data, you have location data, you have where the buses are, whether you're going to crash. You have, eco-friendly applications. You have your vehicles talking to traffic signals, talking to different road sensors, so where different vehicles are, what the congestion levels are like. Maybe you're doing Easy Pass. This is all connected to one communication system, right? And the thing that is missing here is planning practices, methods of public participation, and integration of the information technology, which you see here, with public goals, right? And so public goals can have different levels within itself. Very complex. So what controls or guides planning practices in the real world? So planning theory and history is one, and it works in combination with other socio and economical factors. So how does planning theory intersect with practice? Well, in a sense, this reading by Campbell and Feinstein on the identity of the planning field, they both mention that theory grows through various debates, peer reviews, calibrations, and connections with project applications in practice. So really what we're saying here is one person or one group who comes up with a theory at some time period takes time to develop that theory. It gets peer reviewed, it gets debated, it gets calibrated in different situations, different scenarios, and then it gets debated further, and then you have a upgrade per se, to the theory. So the theory changes over time. So theory is not static by any stretch of the imagination, but it's adaptable and it's always dynamic. So there's crucial connection between theory and history of economical, technical, and political events. And it equals fluidity with new knowledge, skills, and values, right? So these skills can be byproducts of discrete events that give feedback, right? Like natural disasters or wars, right? And so oftentimes you hear the federal government and, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, doing reviews on, say, the responses to hurricanes or wildfires, and you develop new knowledge, skills, and values through the way in which you interact and respond to things using different theories or different methods or methodologies for making a difference. And that is how theories, they come full circle, if you will, in how they develop and redevelop. So planning theory addresses the forms and styles in the field. So example is comprehensive infrastructure criteria. So if you think about the word comprehensive, it goes from start to finish and it encompasses every detail. Then you look at infrastructure and you say criteria. So these are three distinctive words and they all mean something, right? And so planning theory, you need to have different forms, right? So when you think of comprehensive, you're thinking multiple levels. And infrastructure, well, what type of infrastructure? What form of it are you talking about? Are you talking about a highway facility? Are you talking about a bus facility? Are you talking about a land use facility? And the style in which you're going to analyze it. What criteria are you going to use? So planning theory tries and does a pretty good job at providing a framework to planners for identifying all possible interests in a problem-solution couple. So author Susan Feinstein examines sort of three approaches to planning theory, right? She talks about, and I think this is in one of her books, it's in one of her books. I believe it's called Three Approaches to Planning Theory, I believe. And Susan Feinstein, she's a professor of urban planning in the Graduate School of Design at Harvard University. And again, these are the three different approaches that she talks about. The communicative model, right, emphasizes the planner's role in mediating among stakeholders. So stakeholders can be residents and business folks, city councilors, traffic engineers, so forth and so on. Another approach is new urbanism, which paints a physical picture of the newly desired planned city after the 1950s, right? So more of, you're considering urban sprawl. You're not really considering, the centralized downtown district, right, where everything is conducted and everybody lives and eats and sleeps, right? The third is the just city, which talks about sort of a model for spatial relations based on equity, right? Is everyone getting treated fairly? Is there enough space for everyone, every culture, every objective to be matched? So here are just some comments, and there are differences among the types, and they reflect sort of an enduring tension, right? So between a focus on the planning process and an emphasis on desirable outcomes. This is a huge balancing act, right? So when you're planning something, you're trying to plan for a certain set of desirable outcomes, right? But if you get too detailed in the planning process, you lose sight often of what the desirable outcomes are. So you have to make assumptions, you have to cut things out. But if you don't think too deeply or too critically, then your desirable outcomes really don't come out the way that you wanted them to. So it's really a huge balancing act. And Feinstein defends the continued use of the just city model and a modified form of the political economy mode of analysis that underlies it. So the very interesting concepts that Susan Feinstein talks about here. And I think the new urbanism approach is what really is going to be used in combination with the other two, but I think that's really what's going to drive designs over the next few decades here. All right, so here's one project that's trying to rectify this gap and keep the connection to theory, okay? And this is Bill Clark Drive, which I showed before. And here are some before and after landscapes. So this is before reconstruction, and you can see here's a signalized intersection, and it's kind of a T intersection with Bill Clark Drive. So Bill Clark Drive is this road here, and this is sort of the arterial that connects to Interstate 95, the main turnpike. And so what you can see here is this is Bill Clark Drive before the construction. There's a grocery store right here and a bank, another signalized intersection. And what I want you to do is I want you to remember this location right here, because I'm going to show you a video of a project that I did over the summer 2012, in which it showed the impact of the reconstructed Bill Clark Drive, and this is where we took many of the shots. So would this be considered a high priority from a money perspective and at a regional planning scale? So would the MPO here in Portland consider this project a high priority? Well, is it pedestrian friendly? Right? Is it multimodal? Does this road look multimodal to you? Okay, so there's a small sidewalk here, that's fine. There are no real bike lanes. The lane widths are very narrow. So so how do you actually get at the MPO and make your proposal for getting the money? Well, we can say pedestrian accidents or complete streets, right? This is another look. This is intersection of Spring Street and Bill Clark Drive. And so you see, from a traffic operations standpoint, this really, you have a straight lane and a left turn lane here. If there's oncoming traffic, the people can't make a left turn, so traffic backs up here. The traffic signals themselves, you can see in the distance, they look very old. These have been here for ages, ever since I think the traffic signals were installed here, several decades back. So again, it needs upgrade. This is a way that you can make your proposal strong. Here's Bill Clark Drive now. This is an aerial shot here. And what you can see here is they've curved the road. So this is the arterial leading to the main turnpike here, if you go this way. And Bill Clark Drive is leading the way in a coordinated approach for transportation planning. See, what you see here is you see green space right here. So there's actually trees here and so forth. It's hard to tell here. And what they did was they made a center median here to be pedestrian friendly. So they have a crosswalk here and a mid-block crosswalk. And they also planted trees and shrubs, and just the aesthetics and landscape architecture is wonderful. So I'm going to show this video here, and this video is how we're making the connection between transportation operations and transportation planning on Bill Clark Drive.
Welcome. Today we will discuss the urban driver's nightmare, the issues with existing technology, and the steps needed to effectively modernize America's traffic signal systems.
Today's designs now feature new technologies that are becoming commonplace at signalized intersections. These technologies are housed in traffic signal control cabinets.
The existing systems do not meet today's traffic needs. The outdated systems themselves were designed for lower volumes of traffic as well as a different type of travel pattern. Put simply, many of America's roadways and traffic signal systems were designed and built in a different era.
This cabinet is newly installed as part of an upgrade to the signal system.
And in particular, what I might talk to you about is the detection part of this cabinet. This is where we collect information for use back at Central that deals with traffic volumes at this intersection. What we have here are 4 loop amplifiers that are connected to wire loops that are in the pavement out there at the intersection. And as cars pass over those metal loops that are in the pavement, they're recorded by these 4 amplifiers. What we're able to do, which is unique to this system, is measure 24/7, 365 traffic volumes over those loops continuously. This is unique in that most intersections that you will encounter do not have that capability, and that the timings that regulate the signals are based on a single individual traffic count. Here we have the ability to collect data continuously and then process it back at Central in order to keep the signals optimized throughout the year.
After learning about these technological advances, it becomes evident how technology can alleviate the urban driver's nightmare. Let's see how this type of project has transformed current traffic conditions for drivers and members of the community.
This is one of my favorite places in Westbrook. It took 11 years of my life to get to the point where we've got sidewalks on each side, a beautiful pedestrian island in the middle. People can cross comfortably. We've tied both sides of the city back together, and it's efficient. It no longer takes 20 minutes to get from the end of the bypass to Route 25. It can be done very, very quickly.
As seen by our guests, efficiency through technology can make a big difference to the urban driver.
There are numerous benefits that can be gained from modernizing the American traffic signal system. Soon, drivers all around the country will be able to enjoy more efficient commutes with the help of future funding projects as well as assistance from the ARTBA.
And so what you've seen from this video here is really a overall coordinated project. Okay, it took a long time to plan, as Representative Ann Peoples mentioned in the video, but it's a coordinated approach, and the outcome is very, very, very nice. So now, how are these connections made? Right, so that's one of the questions. So Ralph Geckenheimer actually, in his essay on urban transportation planning, Mr. Geckenheimer is actually, he's a PhD in city planning, and he got it from the University of Pennsylvania. He's a professor in the Department of Urban Studies and Planning at MIT. And, you know, in this, he's talking about that land use dimension is engaged at the small scale by planners who are, you know, really concerned with the types of urban form objectives, and also at the large scale by both growth and access management. So as what he's trying to say here is, you know, urban transportation planning really is at a micro and a macro level, and you have different levels in between. And so planners and engineers and traffic operations specialists need to keep this in mind, and it's very difficult to keep the big picture in mind and to have a visual form that we can show people, like, you know, using maps or using diagrams to show people the different levels. It's very difficult for humans to understand this. Now, another thing he mentions is that transportation decisions are usually more determined, right? Whereas land use decisions are sort of idealistic, and they're done at a smaller scale, right? From you know parcel to parcel, as opposed to a transportation project might be a huge intersection, or a network of intersections, or a bridge that's being, you know, proposed, or a new highway, or a new facility, right? And so transportation decisions are almost impossible to change midstream. You know, once you've already decided, that's it. You know, but with more of the urban planning and the land use concepts, those sort of are more fluid. They can kind of change and adapt as a project goes on. So the current interest in automated highways, you know, is really unlikely to hold or develop on a timescale that users and taxpayers can see their money getting used appropriately, right? So, you know, back in the 1950s, when Dwight Eisenhower, you know, instituted the interstate, you know, the Federal Interstate Act, people over, you know, like a 10-year period saw their money, that either tax money, being used effectively because there were so many new highways and new roads that were being built, right? Well, now, you know, with nowadays, even with the current infrastructure we have, getting this connected vehicle technology, for example, or new methods for urban and regional planning to coordinate with traffic operations from an intelligent communications level is very difficult to actually see. I mean, people are not going to see their tax dollars, you know, at work on this tomorrow or next year. I mean, it's going to take 20, 30, 40 years to actually see this. Transportation system management policies, Mr. Geckenheimer, you know, says, are guiding infrastructure projects to balance the conflicts here between short-term efficiency and amenity objectives as well as longer-term facility-type planning. So these are like 3 different levels, right? So you have short-term efficiency issues that need to be addressed. Say for example, at an intersection, a crosswalk is not well marked, right? You have pedestrians getting hurt, and so a short-term benefit might be to add a new sign, or to place some traffic cones there, or to restripe the crosswalk or something, to keep the amenities flowing. Midterm, you might have some design proposals to re-enhance the intersection. Longer term facility type planning is, what does that whole corridor look like? What are you trying to implement on the entire corridor? So Gickenheimer also continues with that the magnitude of change all at once is nearly impossible. There is a time lag between when you're planning something. It's like if you're going to go to the beach, right? And the night before you're planning, it might take you an hour. You're planning your day, what you're going to eat, what you're going to wear, how you're getting there, what you're going to do at the beach, where you're going to go eat, if you're going to see a movie. You're planning your day. So consider that's on a very, very, very small scale, right? So imagine planning that 1 hour planning to go to the beach. Now broaden that to a whole project, a corridor project, or a master plan for a city. That plan takes a long time, and so there's a time lag between what you're planning and what actually gets implemented out in the field. And so transportation planning focuses on this large-scale planning, and it's characterized by different objectives than just simply urban planning. So this works against the battle of land use and traffic management collaboration, because you have transportation planning, which is focusing on the large scale, and you have the urban planning, which is trying to focus on that small, that micro, meso, and macro level of land use and growth management. It's very complex. It's like a spider web. So what does this all mean in layman terms? Complex systems require distinctive types of inputs for ultimate change. One is the short-term solutions at the detailed level, and 2, the longer-term workings hosted at the theoretical level, right? So you're working based upon theory. So how do we bridge the connection between fields? Well, the best way to bridge these connections, according to Gickenheimer, is to use smaller incremental steps on project initiatives. One of the things that when I presented my study at the Cumberland Mills Triangle to the mayor of Westbrook and the city engineer, the city planner, and a few other city councilman folks, one of the things that I mentioned is, if you want to look at this from a corridor perspective or from a long-range perspective, it would behoove us to invest in the technology components for intelligent communications on the traffic signals, for traveler communication systems. That would behoove us more in doing it in smaller steps, because you have that time lag. That would work better than just doing these short-term Band-Aid solutions. Another way is to contain both a balance between quantitative measures and conceptual methodological skills. Wow, I sort of butchered that, but you sort of get the idea here that you can have quantitative measures that say, okay, well, there's lots of traffic. There's 100 vehicles that go through this intersection every hour. Okay, great. But what about the level of service? What about how the drivers feel? Do they feel comfortable? Do pedestrians feel comfortable? Do adjacent landowners feel comfortable with their access to the road, with the traffic dynamics and operations surrounding their land use? It's very complex and at many different levels, but these are two ways that you can start to bridge the connection between these two fields. One last thing that I want to talk about here is this TED Talk, and TED Talk is a series of talks given by professionals in academia, research, and in the different professions. And this particular one is done by Jonas Eliasson, and he's a professor of Transport Systems and Analysis and the director of the Center for Transport Studies, the Royal Institute of Technology, and the School of Architecture and the Built Environment in Stockholm, Sweden. And he says traffic congestion is a pervasive problem that exists in every city. And so different types of cities have mixed land use initiatives, right? They have, they're heterogeneous. They're not homogeneous, right? There's not one standard that fits every type of, town and city that can then be planned or be implemented, right? And so these different mixed land use initiatives are not standardized. But you have to balance with the coordination of other attributes, right? And that's where science and art sort of mix in with this traffic engineering, transportation planning, urban or regional planning. It's not just one or the other, it's both. Transportation planners have thought of different solutions and they include adding more transit options or multimodal balances or complete streets, or, you know, increasing capacity of a bridge by adding more lanes, or by increasing the capacity at an intersection by adding a turning lane, which is fine, but that's not really looking at the larger picture. And what I mean by the larger picture is, who are your customers? So it's like we're in the business field, right? We're marketing for customers, right? Our customers are people, so we need to study people. And so these solutions that I mentioned here, more transit options, multimodal balances, and so forth, they have not worked. And the question is why? And they have a common theme, and it's the attempts of what people should do. So you're planning for people. So it's very difficult to do this on any type of modeling scale, and it requires understanding the complex social system. Now, no single person controls these systems. It's like the economic market, right? It's up to the market, right, to decide the supply and demand of, say, the price of gasoline or the price of oil, right? So no one person controls it. And these complex social systems, in a sense, organize themselves. And so they create incentives, and they don't plan the details for people. They leave it up to people to plan their trip to the beach, given a certain incentive, right? So an incentive might be, well, one road might be tolled, or there may be more congestion on another road, so people are going to plan their trip on a different route, right? And so you're nudging people, right? Since travel patterns are less stable, people's decisions change on a rapid basis. I mean, it's hard to model how people make decisions, but basically you're nudging incentives onto, and in which people will embrace the change. So what does this mean for the Cumberland Mills Triangle? Well, let's first preserve the triangle's history. I think that's important. We want to create both short-term and long-term plans. What are the two sets of objectives, what are the two sets of objectives that we want? Well, we want traffic operations, environmental concerns, economical revenue for the city. I mean, you know, does the city have a debt surplus or a break-even point within the current land use operations at the triangle? These are things that we need to figure out. We need to effectively balance what citizens, commuters want, what different stakeholders want, and you need theoretical models to effectively communicate with citizens, commuters, regional planners, land developers, and etc. And always remember the bigger picture as you progress forward. And so these are just sort of trying to symbolize moving forward. Thank you for listening. I appreciate your time. If you listened to the whole thing or parts of it, I hope you enjoyed it. If you would like more information on this Cumberland Mills study, or anything with regards to traffic operations, transportation planning, my contact information is there. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks.